All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, so this is just the big overall picture of our emissions, and about halfway through is where we are, and then where we're intending to go. And actually, the next slide will clarify things a little bit better. Uh, so the top part is where we are up to 2020 in terms of emissions, and you can see 2005 we just started a big drop, so that's looks very encouraging. And the bottom part is by the sectors, and the transportation is mostly even, and you can see it's all, as Arnie's mentioned before, that big drop is really all just electricity because of the fracking. And once we got the cheap gas, we got rid of all our coal. And that's basically everything. That's the only thing that's really happened statewide. Um, and I got 2021 data, so I was able to update this. So this is our transportation emissions, which are blue, and the targets, which are red. So we might be on target. So there was a big jump 2020 with the COVID, and it's rebounded, but it hasn't rebounded up to where it was as of 2021, but that was still kind of COVID. So we don't really know, right? We might be doing okay or not. And I think next another year of data, I think will clarify that. So maybe there's reason to be hopeful that we're going to be up. But anyway, it's just an ambitious drop, right? That we're expecting. And so this is looking at how people travel in Massachusetts, and we're very heavily, the vehicle miles travel is almost all passengers, cars. There's very little, I mean, truck is the next part, but there's very little bus and other things.
Well, I can't even see bus on this.
It's, yeah, so what
It's
color? It's the pink. So I think it's next to the motorcycle. It's like right here. It's a little band, I think. Yeah, it's not much.
so these are vehicle miles traveled per
Five vehicles
passenger per
type.
year.
This is
Yeah.
from the Mass
Okay.
dot. Yeah, yeah.
So if you
So,
drive, so the way to look at this is if,
Cars are
you know,
where you want to attack the
yeah,
problem,
so, but,
right? That's
you know,
why.
100
Yeah.
miles in,
And either getting people out of cars, which
yeah.
is something else, or just reduce the car. Yeah, that was
but
the point
this
I saw.
is this is, the thing is that if you were to replot this by amount of emissions from vehicle types,
Yeah,
it
I
will
have that somewhere.
it'll look different because
Oh yeah,
trucks, for example, and buses would emit more than
yes,
per vehicle
yeah,
will emit much more than cars, for example.
that's true. That's true.
So, and Paul, this does not include like MBTA and things like that. I mean,
I'm not seeing it here.
I
So
guess the bus
yeah,
includes it, but maybe
so yeah, I think I have that later. But you're right.
okay.
It's not showing the
Yeah, but
rapid. It's
Rishi,
not showing the rapid transit. So,
wouldn't, I
but
mean,
that's still only. I think that's still only like 5% at best. We're still.
even if I'm reading this right, so like
Mhm,
in terms of buses and trucks,
mhm.
I mean, a bus, even though the bus itself emits more, emits
Yeah, this
a
how
higher level of
it carries more than one
emissions,
person.
it's carrying more than one person,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I address that later. So we can.
Okay,
Yeah,
whereas
so
a
I'll.
truck, is probably just carrying one person.
Yeah,
totally
So,
agree. Totally
yeah,
agree.
so,
But this is
yeah,
so if you go into per capita emissions, then you will show that more clearly.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
just
I
saying
have
that,
that stuff later.
yeah.
This was just on the Mass
No,
Department of
thanks.
Transit.
It's very helpful.
Well, me actually, this
Th-
is
That did not include rail, correct?
no. So this
Okay.
is now I was trying to find this for Massachusetts, but I can only find for the US. And but it's in the country, that's how people get to work. And again, it's still a lot of just driving alone.
That data is available, Paul,
For Massachusetts.
for Massachusetts. In fact, we got that
Okay.
data for our little town of Stowe, about
Okay.
how people commute. And it actually looks
Okay, I'll check that. then.
not that you have to you have to look at, it's a census data. I can send that to you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, I think that's where I was getting this from. This was from census, yeah. Okay. But anyway, this shows the transit is 5% of people in the US, and Massachusetts is higher, you'll see. So, but it's still the same message that cars are the big thing. And this is, so I have this one by community, the vehicle miles traveled. Is this what you're, maybe I guess, because I was able, yeah, so one thing about Massachusetts, half of our population is 60 miles from Boston. I mean, it's like everyone, half of Massachusetts is here in terms of population. And so the travel is Boston, Worcester, Springfield. I mean, that's where people are traveling.
I don't well, I'm not understanding this for some reason.
Vehicle miles traveled by community.
Okay.
Okay. So
So
it's
okay,
not,
so this is
it's not, it's each town. Okay. How many vehicle miles traveled
Okay.
occur in that town?
okay, so
Okay.
a town in probably what that, yeah, it's saying what you just said. In Western Massachusetts, there's less people,
There's
so
less people. So
so
right,
the
less
vehicle
people,
miles
right,
traveled
right,
in
right,
Wendell is
right. Yeah.
is less
This is
than,
really, this is almost really a population map.
okay.
Right. Um,
So can you
So-
explain the pale yellow number there, the 182? Do people actually drive 182 miles per day on average in the
no,
yellow?
it's the numbers, I think, are the number of towns that fit that category.
Oh,
So most of our towns have low vehicle miles traveled, right? If you look at you should just look at most of the map is yellow.
okay, so
So
this graph
we
doesn't
have
actually
a
tell us the
large,
QT.
Massachusetts is largely rural with a concentrated urban area. This, right? So if you've driven around Massachusetts, you know that. But it's like I said, it's basically 50% is 60 miles of Boston. So
Right, and then the numbers on the bottom, are those populations somehow?
no, the numbers on the bottom are the vehicle miles traveled in that category. So the darkest is over 3 million vehicle miles traveled in that town, and the yellow is 1/10 that.
And then there's
So
only
the order
one,
of magnitude
yeah,
difference between the
yeah.
dark and the light,
Mm.
and it's
Right,
just
but we don't know
really-
the per capita.
we don't know per capita. No,
Okay.
no.
Thanks.
This is just, I guess this is like in terms of thinking about buses and rail and things like that.
Mhm.
And just knowing, so to me, that's what I see here. That if the mass transit, because it is kind of concentrated in an area, could maybe have a high payoff. Let's see, I have a similar. Okay, this is looking at EVs in Massachusetts, and it's somewhat similar, but it's also kind of different, right? So anyway, Boston itself, as a close-up, right, is it's higher than the rural areas, but it's really where people are buying EVs. It's the Concord, Acton,
Lincoln.
Lexington, Lincoln, right? It's the rich suburbs. That's where it's happening. And that's that's like double the state average there.
Okay. So these are not
The other
absolute
places
numbers.
are
These are,
like Amherst, the college area is the other
yeah.
thing. So those are the two areas that we're succeeding very well in getting people to buy EVs. And then, yeah.
Okay, so this yeah, this is, the metric here is percent rather than total. I mean,
Yes.
different than
Right.
the
Right, right,
So,
right, right,
yeah.
right, 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 right. This is a per capita thing, right? Right. Yeah. So this is not total EVs. It's the fraction of cars sold that are EVs, right? And so, yeah, yeah. We kind of want everyone to be buying them, but the people that are buying them are in the wealthy areas and wealthy, I guess, highest educated or areas. Yeah. So keep that in mind. And I showed this one last time. So this is how we're doing in terms of EVs, and it's including plug-in hybrid. And the red is our targets, and the blue is what we're actually doing, and the inset here is a blow up of the beginning. So we're on track, but so we're not overly panicked, but it just shows you that we've really just barely begun what we have to do. And then the ramp is really occurring in the next few years, is the big ramp up. And the percentages are the percent of cars sold that need to be EV. And so next year, it needs to go up to 15%. And then by 2030, 50, and then all of them by 2035. And then the right, I just did a log plot to show it's kind of a constant increase. And it's basically at 54% every year, which, you know, when it's small numbers, it's not that hard to increase by 50%. But once the numbers get big, to keep increasing by 54%, that's going to be the big challenge.
And Paul, who set the targets and the?
This is the CECP, the Clean Energy Climate Plan. So part of the roadmap bill, right? They put together the backcasting. So where we want to be, how do we get there? So it sets 2050 that all we have is electric cars. So how do we get there? Working backwards. All sales need to be electric by 2035. And working backwards, half the sales by 2030. So that's, you know, so it sort of assumes this logarithmic linearity that things are happening at a constant increase. And whether that makes theoretical sense or not, I don't know. But yeah, so the good news is we're doing it. The bad news is it's real, you know, to keep increasing by 54% is ambitious. And mostly I'm getting is the next couple of years will really tell us if we're doing it or not. And we might be doing it, is my sense. So this was a projection nationwide, and like I said, by 2030 we needed to be 50%, and nationwide they're expecting like 35%. So we just to give a sense that it might be hard, but and this is to give international perspective. And so the US is the orange, so we're doing worse than many other countries, and Norway's pretty much there. Almost, this is the percent of sales. So it's 85% of sales in Norway are EVs.
Short minute here.
And, you know, Iceland makes sense. There's only so far you can drive in Iceland, right? Sweden's doing very well. Germany, France. Germany backed off a little. They cut down their incentives. So it's not that they have less EVs, but just the rate of sales actually went down. So that shows a sensitivity to incentives, which is what I guess Norway shows too.
On the upperability and reliability under increasing complexity for the electricity
So
system.
who's
I guess
Okay.
it's Roy, yeah.
Good.
I mean, one of the reasons Norway does so well is it had the best incentives, and it had them early on. But you can also sort of see it's really just a sideways displacement mostly. It's like once you get started, it ramps up. But the US ramp has been slower. So, and it looks like it could actually be leveling off. So anyway, that's the US. And then I had a plot that was plotting the US versus Massachusetts. And the problem is you really one has to get data from the same source because what one counts as an EV varies, and then just a difference in a few months makes a big difference. If you're going up 50% a year, if you're off a few months in how the data was collected, it'll look very different. So I showed this last time. That's just to give a broad sense of how many EVs, and it's mostly California. That's where it's happening, and we're not as big as California, so we're here. But I kind of got the raw data from this and teased out how we are doing versus other states. Well, actually, first I'll show this from another thing. This is metropolitan areas, and we're 25th or 15th. So, I mean, I had thought we were a climate leader and we were ahead of the game on EVs and things like that. But
Paul, this is
yeah.
total sales, right?
This is
So it's not per capita, for
30%.
example.
This is a no, this is a percent of sales, percent of the total sales, right?
So the
So
population, the size of a state
doesn't
or
matter.
size of an area would make a
Doesn't matter.
difference.
Doesn't
Huh?
make any difference here. Yeah, this is just how well what's the market penetration of EVs.
Yeah.
Now, most, top few are all California. So California had a head start. The availability of EVs are available earlier in California. They had incentives. There were laws requiring a certain fraction of sales be low emission. So California pushed hard early, and so that makes sense. Washington, Seattle, I mean, they had a carbon price, so that might be it. But and I know Atlanta had a very high incentives, but still, trailing Miami, Austin, Texas, Phoenix. So we're not doing as well as I would have thought. I'll just put it that way.
But just I would argue that just go back to the slide. I mean, the last 5 or 6 metropolitan
same.
areas are really very close together, right?
Yeah.
It's not a huge difference.
And as I said, really just a few months. Well, you can see a difference each, in a year, right? Is between 5 and 9. So it is, because it is going up 50% a year. Yeah, just a small, you could just say it's just a month behind, right? You can view it as time, not
Yeah, it could
just
be.
numbers. Yeah, I say you're right. I'll agree. These are all about the same. It's just that we're not the leader I thought we were. I'll just put it that way.
Right.
This is looking at states, and again the share, and this is 2019, so it's just to get a consistent year, and we're down here, so we're 10th. Okay, and again, places that surprise me, so like Arizona, Maryland, Nevada. So I'm a little bit surprised. Again, not big changes, but that again, we're not leading. But I'll show the data other ways. Here, this is EVs per 1,000 people, and so we're 14th. So again, California's an outlier, but these are like 50% better than us. And there's a bunch that are close to us behind too. Anyway, just the point is we're not the leader. That Nevada is significantly ahead of us is surprising to me, right? Arizona. Utah. Florida beats us. I
Yeah.
mean, and we're actually we're pretty much at the U.S. average.
Well, I mean, I'm
We're not
looking at this
leading.
again, and this you've got to have
This is
I mean, this makes, it's, as you said, it's really
Department of Energy.
counterintuitive.
This is
No,
Department of Energy.
I believe
EPA.
the data, but I think it needs some sort of explanation. I mean, we,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do. That's
Okay.
where I'm going to go. I'm going to try
All
to
right.
figure out what the explanation is, right? But I also thought, well, maybe if we just have less total cars, that's the first thing I thought. Well, if we just have less cars, then you're going to have less EVs, right? Then maybe
well,
because we do have a pretty good mass transit system, maybe people have there's less cars, and so I started normalizing it not just in terms of EVs, but to total vehicle registrations. So I normalized that data. Okay. So that helps us in terms of Florida and Maryland. That pulls us ahead of them. But we're still lagging. In fact, some places we're lagging even more, right? So it's not that. And I also normalized another way. I compared gas registrations to electric registrations. So then we're ranked 13th.
so what is
And we're
this one again?
still we're just at we're US average, which is not what I would have thought on all these metrics, right?
So percent of, I'm trying to still figure out what we're seeing on that
On this.
graph, yeah.
So I took
Percent-
battery electric registrations and I took gas registrations.
I see,
I
okay,
just took a ratio.
all right.
Okay. This is the ratio of electric to gas.
All right,
Okay. And
yeah.
then, yeah, essentially we're US average.
I-
So you can say, well, at least we're average, but I thought we were better than average. And we should be, I thought, right?
I thought we were looking at, Paul, when we got on the phone, I remember seeing forwarding you an article that
Mm-hmm.
suggested, as I remember, that we were better than average.
Yeah, well, this is why I went. This is all
Okay.
Department of Energy numbers. So it's getting them all
Okay.
from same
Right.
year
Yeah.
and the same, what I think is the reliable source. Okay. And these are all consistent too. It's not like they're varying, and they're all kind of consistent with that. Well, they're consistent with this. It was a totally different source, and there was consistent with the metropolitans. So I felt there was a consistency here. So yeah, so I was trying to dig into it. Well, how are we different, right? Are there things that make it that we're harder for EV adoption here? So we have a higher population density. We're the third highest in the country. We have the highest per capita income in the country. And as Roger knows, maybe, we have the most doctors. We also have, I think we're like number 1, 2, or 3 in most health indicators, um, like infant mortality and just overall health. We're among the thinnest, believe it or not, populations. So we're a very healthy state. We're the most educated, whether you look at high school graduation, college graduation, advanced degrees, we're number 1 at any of those. We're heavily Catholic. We're majority white. And it turns out there's big religious differences in people adopting EVs, and there's racial differences. The Human Developmental Index, we're the highest, which means we're the best people, I guess. I don't know. There's a bunch of criteria too. It usually is used to rate countries, but they can also use it to rate states, and we come out the highest. And I said before, our population is largely gathered around Boston. So I tried to look at if any of those could count. Also, is it just the chargers? Is it that we don't have urban chargers? What kind of incentives do we have versus other states? You know, we had a Republican governor during the key period of time. So I just looked at, did that, did that correlate with anything? Yeah, and there's a suburban population, and I hadn't teased this out, but something that occurred to me that if I look at other states, like I lived in New York, I lived in Texas, I lived in California. In those states, people basically took their vacations in state. And my anecdotal evidence is a lot of people, Massachusetts go to Maine, they go to New Hampshire, they go, elsewhere for vacations. And I'm just wondering if the psychology of, because I hear this a lot too. I get an EV, but my family always goes off to Maine, and we're not sure we'd make it, that sort of thing. So yeah, I tried to tease out some of these to see if they gave an explanation. So there's a lot of things. So this is, whoops. This is ranking the states. We're at the bottom there. We're just below the US average. So population density, I mean, New Jersey's even higher. District of Columbia is even higher than that. So I didn't see any real clear correlation that somehow our density would explain it. Degree rank. I think this is this is ranking in terms of education. So again, we're number one. And you would think being educated would help. I mean, that's what it shows. That, higher education should be more EV adoption. And if you look at the, anyway, I don't see any kind of correlation there. New Jersey is even more Catholic than Massachusetts. So, I mean, I would have thought we'd be at least similar to New Jersey, and not that New Jersey is doing like 50% better than us.
Is New Jersey doing, I forget, was New
Yeah,
Jersey in your earlier
well, I can go
graphs?
back. New Jersey, they're like
Oh, okay.
5%,
Yeah,
and we're 2.8. They're doing a lot better. Right? That looks like a significant difference. Just looking for easy explanations, right? And well, what I did discover though, like I said, there is I think it should be worth I'd be interested in doing it. Looking at the Pew Memorial Trust surveys of different religious groups and how they feel about the climate and adopting EVs, there are gigantic differences. And one rule of thumb is just the more religious people claim to be, no matter what the religion, the less they're interested in doing anything about climate, the less they're interested in an EV. And it seems to correlate with an idea of, God will take care of it. So anyway, that's worth looking at. But Catholics, I don't mean to pick on Catholics. Catholics turn out to be right in the middle in terms of religious groups. They pretty much fit the national average. So being heavily Catholic is not an explanation. And in fact, not having many evangelicals should actually be helping us. So it's not religion. Now, it turns out minorities on polls show greater interest in electric vehicles than whites. Whites are the lowest, then whites, I forgot whether it's Hispanics or blacks next, and then Asians are the highest in terms of interest in buying an EV. So, and we are 71, at least on this one. So we are among the highest in terms of whites, but Utah is more so, and Vermont, 93%. So I don't think it's that. The governor thing may pan out. Whoops. I mean, they all had a governor who was the governor in 2020, and Vermont had a Republican governor. Utah changed. So that's possible, right? Because Baker, kind of was slow walking everything, right? So I'm open to that as a possible explanation of why we just aren't doing as well. I looked at the incentives that different states gave. This is thousands of dollars for getting an EV. We're at the time, at 2020, we're 2,500. But some had much higher, like Colorado, or possibly higher because they were some were income based, and Arizona, New Jersey. But then some didn't really have any direct rebate, although they had other things like you didn't pay an excise tax or your registration was free or smaller things. So everyone had something, but in terms of the big ones, there are only, no, actually Vermont had a much bigger, as 4,000. But only like half of them even had these large incentives. So I don't think it's that either. So I don't know, to go back, the only thing, whoops, in terms of what, so in the end I say I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out, and I don't know. Like I said, it's possible Republican governor. It could be. I'll look at charges in a moment. But it turns out we're okay on chargers. We don't have urban charging, so that could be it. That's a possibility. And it's how is our population distributed? It could be that, it could be the out of state, or it could be just something else I'm not thinking of. And I don't know if anyone else any other ideas as to why we're
Well,
not doing as well as we should.
You would think, the percent of the population that votes Democratic would be correlated. Might
Okay.
be.
Yeah, but we're pretty high.
We
We're among the
are,
highest.
which again, this is why
So this
none
might
of
even
this
match,
is
right?
making any sense to me.
And Utah does not vote Democratic.
There's a very distinct
Arizona is 50-50. Nevada is 50-50. Yeah, I'm sorry,
east
go ahead.
and west. East and west is
Yes.
a pretty big
Yeah.
determinant.
Yes, the best
So-
are all the West Coast, right?
Right.
So, and Hawaii is its own thing. It's like Iceland. It's limited driving, so EVs make sense there too. But you're right. It is, in fact, New Jersey's the first Eastern one to show up. And I guess that's where I mostly feel, that's where when it really irks me, I guess. I look at New Jersey for this message. And New Jersey is also, it's like most people live right near the big city, right? It's kind of similar that way. And we're similar, again, same high density. So in the same religious or similar religious breakup. So we're a lot like New Jersey. So why New Jersey's doing better, I guess, is one that
Do you
particularly
have
questions me.
access to things like gas tax?
Oh, I was gonna do that. Gas prices. I was gonna look up gas. I was gonna do gas
Yeah,
prices,
because
right? Yeah.
California is historically high.
Yes. Yeah, that could be
Um,
it. And again, that the Washington and I think maybe Oregon have certainly Washington has a carbon price, and so I imagine that would raise their gas price. So that might be it actually. That was on my to-do list. I didn't do that yet. Was to just price of gas over that period of time. And I do hear anecdotally from my brother-in-law who's in California, who sounds like their gas prices are 50% or more what we pay.
Have you thought about what goes on in car dealerships, and also the possibility that folks who live in Massachusetts keep their cars longer, so the turnover isn't as great. If you have a lot of money, you buy a high quality car, you keep it for a long time. And I'd be curious about, whether the car dealers just weren't on board pushing it, bringing in the EVs.
Well,
I
that's
don't know
true
if there's
everywhere,
different
though.
distribution of car dealerships in Massachusetts that could have have some implication there.
Mhm.
Maybe hard to get an EV here. I don't know.
Well, it was just easier in California. I mean, that's why they had it. And there were, I know back when I was looking, I got my Nissan Leaf 2013. And yeah, there really weren't any other options. Although there were EVs being made by other cars, they just weren't selling them in Massachusetts. So, I mean, that was certainly true in the 2010s. But I mean, most of the purchases are really just representing the last few years, right? Because there is that ramp. So it's really 2020 on is where the big numbers are. It's just a recent thing. I mean, there is a problem with car dealers everywhere. They don't sell EVs because they don't, because the business models, they make their money on the oil changes and the tune-ups and the repairs, and they don't get that with the EVs. And so they don't have the incentive to do it.
But
Uh,
earlier, Paul, you showed a slide which showed fairly dramatically that the uptake of EVs is much higher in the wealthy suburban communities than it is
yes,
in.
yes. Well, but it could
Um,
be the other way. People, poorer people they hold on to their cars until they die, and wealthier people just maybe want a new car every 3, 4 years, right? That might be it.
But
To
then,
Roger's point.
yeah, but I mean
But then
that.
again, since we're a wealthier state than most, that shouldn't. I mean, there was a time when cars rusted out, and so we used to have a very different profile. But I think it could well be gas prices. I'll look at that. I guess I mean, I don't really. I think they're still in the $2 somewhere, right? Not that I looked in a long time, but I think, is that right? Does anyone know? They were $4 like 10 years ago. They were $4 a gallon. So I think they've been kept low.
Do people even think about? I mean, I don't know that people really think about gas versus electric prices.
Yeah, I mean,
in
I
the
think
deci-
in
No, but they
Massachusetts,
they do
because
feel the gas price, right? You fill up and it costs you $70, and that just irks you, right? If you fill up and it costs you $20, you feel that you don't think about it.
but in Massachusetts, as you showed, is the wealthier suburbs where the pickup is the highest,
Yeah,
adoption is the highest, so they're less likely to be sensitive to gas prices.
well, that's true too.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, if
I don't
you
know.
have ideas, I'll continue to look at things and see if I can
Yeah.
tease out something.
But yeah, I mean,
And it
I
might
think
just be the urban charger, right? That could be it, because we do have a lot of people in Boston that are just not
I guess
engaged.
it could be.
Yeah,
I-
I'll continue to look at that. And it would be nice to know, because then we would know what we need to do to get it up, right? If we knew why it was low.
Do we still feel
There is a big study coming out from the federal government. I forgot what it's called. UVis or something. They started it last year, so the data starts in 2023. They're gonna put out the data next year. And basically they just interview tons of people in each state about EVs and what's keeping them from doing it, and what what is it they like about them and everything. So that's gonna come out, and they're collecting the data now, and they have it back a year, but that they haven't said anything about it yet. So that might help.
yeah.
Did you see this article from WBUR, April 2024? There are more electric vehicles in Boston, but the region lags behind other metros. It's a lengthy
Yeah.
discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I even, this one?
So
No, not
it
that.
has the
I did
metro,
see it. I did see it. I don't, maybe I didn't post it.
the metro area. I mean, I guess it maybe the big difference is the metro area thing, which would mean the chargers could be a big thing, and potentially at least.
Mhm.
But I don't know. That's just another piece of it.
Well, it's to be encouraged that that's one of the things in the Senate bill.
Right.
So yeah, I just, in case you don't know, these are what our incentives are at the moment. So 3750, and we do used cars now too.
Right.
And we're doing a point of sale, which is a big one. So you're seeing it right off. You're not having to, wait 4 months later for your taxes to get it, and then you're not really making the connection as much. And it's just more of a pain. So that, and then is and that's the federal, and in the state, it's 35 to, I'm sorry, it's 75 because it's broke up in two parts. So 7,500 federal, 4,000 on a used car for the state. For most people, it's 3,500, but it could be 5,000 with income restrictions. And it's the same one whether it's a used or a new car. And again, it's point of sale. So, and there's other things in terms of chargers, home chargers, and things like that, and upgrading of your electrical box that Mass Save will help you with. So we're pretty generous, and we might be among the most generous. And I showed you this, that there are a lot of chargers. I can particularly tell you, having looked all over West Texas to find chargers, we're much better than a lot of places. But yes, this was this BUR or the Globe, one of them, that we're going to need. Yeah, we're going to need a lot more chargers, which is true. But I was looking at where we are in charges. So what they say is you want there to be one public charger for every 10 cars and a fast charger for every 100 cars. So we're actually about at that. We have 66,000 EVs and 6,000 public chargers. So it's the 1 to 10, and we have 700 DC fast chargers. So that's the 1 to 100. So we're there. Then on the right shows that the U.S. Is not there. So the U.S. is 26 cars per charger, not the 10. But what strikes me is, the country that's doing really well, Norway, actually has the worst on this grouping anyway, 34. But maybe once you have so many, I don't know, or maybe it's because there's so many EVs, and that's why.
Electric, I thought, I was,
so you're reading it backwards, right?
I was reading it backwards.
Yeah, bigger numbers are bad.
Bigger numbers are
cars.
bad.
These are the cars per EV.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, South Korea, I was there recently, very few electric cars, which is maybe why the number of charges is high. Yeah, it's interesting. So anyway, we're doing okay. The thing is yeah, this is just like how many we're going to need. I guess I can skip that, or just maybe a clearer way of
Well,
saying it.
that was an that previous slide, Paul. I mean, one of the things I was wondering about is the adoption of EVs as a function of whether you own your own home and can charge at home.
Uh-huh.
I would presume, again, that the percent of homeowners that can charge at home who have EVs is much higher than those that don't. I don't.
Well, that goes to the urban charging issue, right?
But it doesn't, it doesn't go, it doesn't go anywhere to explain the difference between states that you were focusing
Again,
on.
New Jersey, right?
Right.
Um, so but I mean, it could be. So, and I'm not sure. I haven't looked at it really our demographics in terms of suburbs versus urban and how that splits up. But this is anyway our need. So these numbers are in thousands of chargers, and so 2023, slightly different numbers that I showed a little bit. So I guess maybe it could be 6 months difference or something. But we're still in that um, the 10 to 1, 100 to 1 ratio. So we're okay in 2023, but just looking ahead, we're going to have, by next year, we need to double and go up 10 times by 2030 on the public chargers. So I guess this top thing is the big challenge, going up tenfold and actually, or even doubling next year. So whereas we're meeting it right now, it's going to be, because we are on that rapid slope, it's going to be hard to keep it up. Yeah, some of the incentives. So Eversource will give you 1,400 wiring. National Grid gives you 700, but they also have the off-peak charging discounts. Anyway, well, this is sort of what you're saying. So 86% of EV owners have home chargers.
Okay,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
So not virtually all, but most.
And this is this is
A
for
lot.
Massachusetts, Paul.
yeah, this
Right?
is Massachusetts. This is
Yeah.
Massachusetts. This is Massachusetts. So yeah, I was looking at we were talking earlier about buses and the per capita, right? So this is how much grams of CO2 per mile cars, pickups, gas buses, diesel buses each put out. And so, yeah, bus puts out, 4 times more. But so if you have, once you get past 4 passengers, your per person is, you start doing better on the bus. And, buses can have 5, 10, but they could have 60, right? 70. So there's a lot of potential, it seems to me, in getting people, because if it's only 4 times more, and it could take a lot more than just 4 times the number of people, getting people into buses would have a really big payoff. So this is state policy. So it's again the CECP, and their targets really don't have any increase or decrease in vehicle miles traveled. So they're just totally focused on EVs and doing it that way. And so that has been blamed on Governor Baker, but it may be. So I've been looking at how much. Well, I guess you can look at it 2 ways. Since we are very heavily car dependent, you could argue, well, that's where we need to make the decreases. But you could also argue, well, we just need to be less car dependent and get people into other things. That there's, I guess there's big payoffs both ways, right? Getting a lot of people into EVs will have a big impact, but also just getting people out of cars in general, there's a lot of potential there. This is the CECP's argument for why they're not really doing vehicle miles travel. And we are lower than the average, and it's and they're saying doing a mode shift won't cause a big decrease, is their argument. and they're using that we are dense. Anyway, that was their argument on why they didn't do it. This is national. And no, so this is the energy use. And so there's not much energy use. It's really just cars, trucks, buses, planes. That's where the energy use is happening. And so because rail is not using, it's maybe rethink how much we should be prioritizing electrifying the rail beyond the fact that when you do an update, you want to be updating to electric. But whether we need, putting money, should be putting money into electrifying the rail or into just having more people use the rail, and which is going to pay off better.
Paul, can you go back to that last slide again? The one, yeah.
So this is
So I
energy,
understood, but yeah, that's energy, and it is
and this is
starts out light
national.
duty vehicles, medium air, which I presume is air travel.
Yeah.
Rail, and water, I presume is what? I guess it's on
Ferries,
ferries.
mostly ferries.
So
and,
what
yeah.
is pipeline?
Oh yeah, that's what I know. In fact, this is yes. Well, I think it's the gas pipelines. You got to pump them, right? It's just actually I saw something elsewhere that was even higher on this. Let's see. Right.
Is this,
No,
that where-
that's just something that struck me that the pipelines are using a fair amount of energy, right?
to move,
I guess it's moving the gas, is my
moving
guess.
either the natural gas or gasoline or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
oil or whatever it happens to be.
yeah, yeah. Let's see.
So that's considered, I never, I hadn't realized
Yeah, no, that caught
that
my eye
putting
too.
energy in pipelines is considered part of the
Well, I actually, I don't know
transportation
if,
sector.
I don't think I put it down. I was going to follow up on it, but I saw something else that made it seem even like more significant. But yes, that is kind of shocking, right? Assuming that this is, yeah, well, it is. It says natural gas. Yeah. So just piping the national gas, just piping it, right, is costing us more energy than all our rail in the country,
That's pretty amazing.
right?
It would be interesting to compare that number to the transmission and distribution losses in the electric grid, which are like 7 to 10%.
Uh-huh.
I suspect it's less than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's also there's I'm not sure, I don't know if I put it in here, but I was also looking at the subsidies. And so the interesting thing is the federal government, most of its subsidy of transportation is going into air, and very little is going into rail. It's air and then highways. And if you look at states and communities, it's rail. So that's where it's rail and highways. But the federal government is ignoring rail and pouring lots of money into air travel. So in terms of CO2, that's backwards. So,
So Paul, I agree with
federal
you on the
policy.
rail issue. I agree with you on long distance trains that can carry goods and passengers throughout the country. Excuse me. Excuse me, but commuter rail often goes through ECA communities. And as you know, we have a big issue.
There's the whole issue of the diesel, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I'll agree to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if I think just in terms of CO2, right? But
yeah,
in terms of pollution and things like that, yeah, let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
But if I think strictly in terms of CO2, I guess I felt, and same thing with buses, it seems maybe we're better off just more buses. We get a better CO2 impact. And again, there's still the pollution issue, but
But from buses, you can really reduce the pollution very, very significantly.
yeah. And the hybrid buses, I'll talk about.
And yeah, there are hybrid buses too, yeah.
Make a big difference. So we're actually on the lower end on vehicle miles travel in terms of we're 39th, low is good, or high number here is good. Um, so we're doing well actually in general on vehicles miles travel. So fourth largest, so actually I think I can tease that out better here. So this gives you graphically a size of mass transit urban ones. And so New York is the giant one, but we're pretty much the same size as LA and San Francisco and Chicago. We're a lot smaller city than Chicago and LA. And yet our transit system is comparable. So we're actually, by US standards, have a high ridership and a good, but it could be a lot better, which is this. So there was a rail vision done so I guess around 2018, there were some derailments and all kinds of problems with the T. And so they did a bunch of studies, and one of them was a rail vision looking forward to what we could be doing. And they put together 6 plans. And I just numbered them 1 through 6. And let's see. Oh yeah, let me go this is the bottom line. So this will, yeah, here, this is the results of those plans. So this is the increase in ridership in thousands. And so in theory, over 200,000 in Plan 6, which would be 2.5 times the current ridership. Okay, so almost tripling the number of people if they went to the most ambitious, but it could be doubling, or depending on how ambitious, they become more ambitious as you go 1 through 6. But it is possible to significantly increase the ridership, and it's mostly a question of frequency of service and where service is offered. So so there's the cost. So they go from 2 billion to almost 30 billion. So there's that. There's where will they offer this 15-minute service? So this 15-minute service, 30-minute service, 60-minute service. And they divided it up into north side stations and south side stations. And the third option is what they call key stations. And so along the commuter rail would be 2, maybe 3 stations. So it's sort of like a express service versus local service. And so the least ambitious, the best you do is you offer 30 minutes peak, 60 minutes off peak. Getting more ambitious, you have these, on the north side, you have these key stations. They get 15-minute service all throughout the day. And the peak hours, the key stations on the south side, I'm sorry, you get 30-minute service on the south side key stations, and on the south side during peak, and the other north side stations during the peak, and again 60 minutes off peak. The Plan 3, it's the key stations on both north and south get the 15-minute service. Everywhere peak is 30 minutes, everywhere else is 30. Getting more ambitious, the inner core closer to Boston gets 15-minute service, peak 30, off peak 60. And the most ambitious is everywhere gets 15-minute service. And so that's where you get the almost tripling of of use, is if you can provide frequent service reliably everywhere, all day. So, but you get increased ridership, so the numbers of increased riders is on the bottom. The other thing these different things did is they extended it, so extended the rail to Providence. I'm sorry, that's I got confused there. This is not the extension. Sorry, that's talk about that later. This is where it's electrified. So electrifying Boston Province, electrifying everywhere, electrifying the inner core. So those are the different options. It seems I've been trying to follow up on what was done with these options, and it seems like they're somewhat guiding the MBTA. The MBTA board only came into existence the year after this. There was a different governing entity before that, the FMSB, I think it was called. So I brought it up at the ZEV Coalition, and they said ELM said what they do is they use this to guide their lobbying and saying this is what's possible, this is what the study shows, can we do this? And that the MBTA has been incorporating this in pieces, right? So right now the Fairmont line has 30-minute service, for example, and the Fairmont line is becoming electrified. So there was also
Excuse me,
extended.
Paul,
Yep.
on the previous slide. I just wonder if you could explain the difference between the electrifying everywhere versus the inner core. If it's the inner core, does that mean that the inner core would be served by like battery powered locomotives, and then diesel locomotives would go everywhere, as opposed to having those pantograph arms overhead to do the electrification?
Yeah, their plan was actually to go to a hybrid locomotive that would run on electric where available, and then switch to diesel in places where it was too difficult.
Interesting.
Is it all
So
in?
that made sense in terms of infrastructure, because otherwise to go
Mm.
all electric, like there were bridges that had to be redone, and there were some significant problems at a few key places. And they thought it was cheaper just to get a more expensive locomotive than to deal with those few places. And it wouldn't be using diesel for much of the trip, but it was just cheaper than the infrastructure. But people are saying this is an untried,
Mhm.
it's an untried technology, let's just do it right. So it is a point of contention.
What about locomotives that use battery power? Are they? I heard they exist. Do you know anything
Mhm.
about?
That was one of the arguments against the hybrid, is to do that. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, trains are massive, right?
Yeah.
So I think about the battery needed for that.
I know. I'm just curious. I was surprised they even existed, and I don't know where I read about it. And I
Yeah.
thought electrification always meant building this huge infrastructure of overhead wires. But my God, you just put a train with a battery in this,
Yeah.
that's going to be dramatically less complicated and less expensive. If that's evolving and going
Yeah.
to be a thing in the future, I don't know.
Well, and because you have you know what your route is, you know where your up and down times are, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You can really be very efficient and yeah. So it is open.
And,
I know
yeah,
with ferry, I mean, they do ferry boats, right, in
yeah.
Scandinavia now, because it's a similar thing. You just know. In fact, if you have a removable battery, you dump your battery at the end of the line, right? It recharges till the next train comes by, and then it loads it onto there. And so you just recharge at the ends.
Yeah.
And so you're
So
you're not even, there's no downtime, really. The train is running constantly, just the battery just has a downtime.
yeah, fuel cells may have more promise in this kind of an application when they are fully developed, but not right now. But this idea of swapping batteries has been proposed even for cars. Rather
Yeah.
than having these fast chargers, you could if you could swap the battery, but I don't think there were a couple of companies that were trying to do this, but I don't think it
Yeah,
went.
yeah, Neo in China was the biggest,
Yeah.
and it just didn't seem to work.
Yeah.
But it's a different situation because here it's a captive market.
Oh, totally, totally different. Yeah.
And you don't need them. The problem with the battery, you needed them everywhere, and you had to have different kinds of batteries.
Yeah,
And
yeah. No, this is a very different.
here it's you really just need you might just need one, one or two, and you know exactly what you're doing. Yeah. The other thing is they're going to add more rail to the South Shore, New Bedford, and Fall River. That's not South Shore, wherever that area is called, and towards Providence. And so that was also part. I didn't really include it in those studies, but they were also another piece of it. So I was looking at the ridership. It's only 1/7 of it is the commuter rail. Most of the ridership is the bus and the downtown subway.
Hmm.
So in terms of numbers,
It says here the intercity battery powered trains can cover 70 kilometers on non-electrified routes,
okay,
operating at intercity
yeah, 40
speeds.
miles, yeah, that would be
At the
that would certainly get you through any down spots. And yeah, how far is the commuter rail goes out? Maybe I don't think any of it goes out more than 50 miles, right?
Hmm.
So
Anyway, Hitachi,
would you
they're
say
making
70 kilometers? So yeah, it's
70
that's almost,
kilometers.
yeah, that would probably cover the entire route, actually.
So anyway, check it out. Hitachi's making these as we
So
speak.
they're looking at those different plans and how they would affect, so the different, or these are different policies, I guess, different policies, and adding a cost on vehicle miles travel, how that would affect, um, how would that cause a mode shift, I guess. So this was a study. I guess the key thing that struck me is, well, Suffolk County is the one most sensitive to having a big vehicle miles traveled shift of theoretically 30%, and a lot of combinations look like they would accomplish that. So, I mean, I guess that's Boston and Alston and those areas, right? Other areas, the rest of the state, we're talking like 5%. So again, in terms of targeting vehicle miles travel, it looks like the Boston area is where the greatest sensitivity is, and that might be where efforts would make sense. And then I just mentioned this last time, this was a survey, hybrid buses. So it also means there was a lot of new hybrid buses that they're not wanting to electrify. But it is an encouraging thing. So yeah, this shows the so yeah, the composition now is 65% hybrid. Yeah, so ideally we'd like it to be all electric and, replacing the diesel. To electric is ideal, but it's not as awful going to hybrid, I guess. I mean, it would still give us a cut. I mean, long range, if we want this to go to zero, it needs to go to electric. So balancing that out.
These are not plug-in hybrids, right? These are regular hybrids like
It's
the
just regular hybrid, yeah, like
Yeah.
like the original Prius,
Right.
right. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah. So the other part of mode shift is just getting people not to commute, right? And so I just got this from the federal government. So COVID caused 20 million people nationwide to basically stop commuting. So they don't have data going forward the next few years, so don't know if that's gone back or I just know family members. I know working, they've gone back a little bit, but not that much is what I've observed. I mean, the other part is the real estate collapse in cities, right? So there's a downside to people not going into the city. But there's the other part. By income, that's almost all just people making more than 75,000. So it's people at wealthy jobs are the ones that are staying home and not working. So that's a good thing. And I think that's really about all I think I want to say.
Paul?
Yeah.
Did you see any discussion about the loss of gasoline tax revenues from extensive electrification of the vehicle fleet?
No, but that's the big issue, right? With the task force that
services are currently down statewide. Delays in public safety response may occur. Call local public safety.
are all our phones going off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My phone. Oh, okay.
Yes, 911 is down.
Public safety. Oh, it says state is letting us know that 911 doesn't work.
Well,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was in a grocery store once, and one of these alerts went out. It was really weird watching everybody's phone go off at the same time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so we talked
yeah.
about
So
gasoline
the state,
taxes.
there's a state commission, right? And Crichton is on it. That is supposed to come out with a report December, January to address that problem. Because we have to, right? Because it was so it's just a transportation funding task force. And
Oh, that's the one I see. Yeah,
yeah, that's the one we were talking about. And it's also
Yeah,
supposed
yeah.
to address the whole
everything.
congestion pricing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Which the
yeah,
government has
the whole
next.
thing. Because we got to figure out funding first, because we're just going to need a lot of money, especially those MBTA plans. Those are all, like I said, was it 2 to 40 billion? So
Yep.
depending on how the more money you have, the more ambitious you could be on doing those things. Electrifying trains or whatever train strategy you take, and just running more service. All those things are going to take a lot of money. But this loss of gas tax revenue.
Yeah,
What other states are doing is they're putting a surcharge on electric vehicles,
yeah, yeah.
right? And states like Texas are putting surcharges that are 4 times more than what the gas tax would have been, because it's an oil state, so they don't want people buying electric cars. But you really don't want to put the burden on electric car vehicles. You want to
No.
either spread it fairly, or
Yeah.
ideally you want to have incentive for people to get out of gas cars.
Yep.
That's why we were hoping to follow New York's lead in congestion pricing, and the mess happening in New York.
Well, I hope you don't follow New York's lead, given what's happening in New York.
Well,
But
well, they were
our
all ready to do
governor,
it. It was supposed to start the end of this month. They already have the
Our-
cameras up. Everything
yeah.
was all set
Yeah.
up to do.
but our
Now,
governor
it
has
could be we
already
could argue there's a chance for us to, be better than New York, right? That argument might work.
But here's the thing: our governor has already ruled out any new
Yeah.
taxes on to help with transportation. So that's
Yes.
so
Yeah.
we have that going down. We have the real estate taxes going down.
Yeah.
We have a lot of problems. And if we say,
Yeah.
I'm getting into politics now, if we say
Yeah.
that there are no new taxes, then what the hell are you going
Yeah.
to do?
Right. Right. I'm with you. Yeah.
Well,
Well, that is the big issue, right? The money, and
It
that
always
we're
is.
just waiting for an answer, and that the governor has not been helpful. Is a problem.
so Paul, I took away from the the first 2/3 of your presentation that Massachusetts
Could do better.
is not a leader
Yeah, yeah.
in the country. I don't know that you were able to put your finger on why that's the case.
No, not yet.
But I mean, it seems to be the case that, we are a leader in terms of climate legislation and climate policy. And that, I mean, one possible conclusion is that that hasn't
Doesn't work.
translated into higher
Yeah.
adoption of
Mhm.
of EVs. I mean, it seems like they have to sell themselves for for some reason that we haven't put our finger on, either in regulations or in legislation.
Mhm.
But we
Although
don't know what that is, I guess. It's
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, you can view those in terms of adoption, or you can view them in terms of time, right? That we're just 6 months behind, right? Is another way of seeing it. And so that could be just the bakers slowing things down. I mean, that might be the explanation, or it could be what I really need to look at is the suburban, urban, the housing, right? The urban charging. I think that might be it. That might be the stumbling block that's making it harder for us.
yeah, I mean, you
Uh,
showed that, what was it, 86% or 84% of EVs were charged from home.
Yeah, right,
And
right. So that could be the entire thing, right? And it's just it's homeowners that are living in Lexington
so,
and not in Cambridge, right?
I mean, do we know what percent of households can charge from home?
Oh, well, I mean, in theory,
Because so
what do you mean?
that's the
What do you mean? I'm not
presumably
sure
the
we're
low.
not sure what your question is. I mean,
So it's
anyone can upgrade their power service and add a charger, right?
well, not if they live in a
Oh, by
apartment
home. Oh, you're
building
not,
or
Well, okay. I thought you meant
condominium
by
complex.
home. I thought you meant home versus apartment building. Okay.
No, I just
By their domicile.
what percent
Okay.
of households can
Yeah. What percent? Right.
can charge?
Yeah,
I mean, that
that's
seems to be the
a thing to look
the
at.
low hanging fruit at this point. At least,
Mhm.
that's where the vast majority of EVs have been sold, which makes,
Mhm.
obviously that makes sense. If you can't charge your vehicle, then
Yeah.
makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
But
So I guess what I need to look at actually is, what's the percentage of people that live in apartments, right?
that would be interesting, because there's a lot of discussion, right, about in every sector about focusing on on EJ communities and low and moderate income folks. And I would guess that those communities would have significantly lower percent of households that could charge from home. And is the best way to pick up EV adoption, somehow being able to make that segment of the population able to charge, within short walking distance of where they live. I'm not sure how that would be done.
Or do we just need to make it that you don't need a car in Boston, or it's even a pain to have a car in Boston? Right.
Well, I keep, personally, I keep focusing on our 2030 goals and
okay, shorter term.
Shorter term. And
yeah,
I think the basic assumption being that you know, that the mode switching of transportation is not going to be an extremely significant factor or more than it is today in the next 6 years.
Well, I mean, that um, the Wachusett line that I'm on, that we're on, since that's gone from, it's gone to every hour service, right? That's made it far more attractive than what it was.
Yeah, but I
And
think you showed,
and the other places going to a half-hour service, I think that could have a
yeah,
significant.
but didn't you show, maybe you didn't show, I think we were looking at that spreadsheet a few weeks ago that did include, at least seemed to include rail.
Yeah, I was trying to find that one.
And I think I sent that to you, that spreadsheet. But you know, all of rail as
Doesn't-
compared to,
Is very
you know,
little
is very little. So if you,
in terms of emissions, right?
so if you double that, you know,
But I
double
thought
ridership, it's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna have a huge,
no, that's no, that was just emissions though, right?
that was emissions, right?
But that's because you're translating the emissions to electricity, right? They're not showing up as transportation.
No. Well, anyway, I mean, the question, I guess, is, you know, if you're trying to hit your 2030 targets or make some real effort to come close to them.
Yeah, but whether
What-
you stick a person in a train or you stick them in an EV, you've gotten them out of a car either way. It's the same, mostly the same decrease.
Right, but, you know, I think what the CECP is saying, and what I think is probably the case, is that, you know, the most folks who are gonna switch from an internal combustion engine, you know, would
Yeah.
switch to an EV rather than switch
Yeah.
to, you know, commuter rail.
Yeah, well, those are my things in the beginning, showing that it's cars is where what people are using,
Right.
right?
So,
And so, yeah, and so even if you, right, so if it's 94, you know, if you doubled the non-car use, you took out 5% or something, right? So you're right, it's a smaller chunk by doubling these other things because they're not a big piece. But we are sort of in a all of the above approach, right? We kind of need to do everything. And 5% is basically all the EVs we've done so far.
yeah,
So
but I mean, all of the, you know, again, all of the above, I mean, there was an article a few days ago in the Globe about, you know, how the MBTA is even going to keep running at all.
Mhm.
Much less, you know, have more frequent service or convert itself to all electric.
they seem to be having success in increasing their rates, you know, how often their frequency of service, and in terms of repairing their lines. I think was it the blue line is completely repaired
Mhm.
and they're working on the green now, and I think the red is next. But they, at least what I've seen at the MBTA meetings, where they just showed the maps of where they had trouble spots, and it just looked, if you just looked at the trouble spots, you mapped out the entire system, because every few miles on every line there was a trouble spot. And now several of the lines are cleared out, so they're, at least they claim, they're making substantial and rather rapid progress at fixing the lines, so that gives you the reliability and that gives you the more frequent service, which could give significant increases. What I kind of wanted to do and haven't quite, just starting to get my head around, is really what's going to make the most sense in terms of cost effectiveness, right? Is it really, should we just be thinking EVs and getting that to work? Is that really the best part, or does mode shifting make sense? Should we not be worrying about electrifying the mass transit and just getting more of it? So with the cost benefit analysis or the return of investment, I guess,
Mhm.
in each of these things, and so I haven't been able to compare the apples and oranges of the costs of the different pieces.
Mhm.
And that's actually kind of what I wanted to do next, just my own clarity of mind, right? To
Mhm.
figure out really where to be advocating.
I wonder who else is working on exactly this project. Our Secretary of Transportation and Department of Transportation, some of the like Acadia Foundation, MAPC, what is it, M4T or Mass for Transit,
Yeah, FRT Transit Matters.
Transit Matters. I wonder if it'd be worth just contacting.
Contacting them, saying, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
that makes
what
sense.
do you, you may have done some of the work that they would appreciate, and they may have something going. Has there been in the past, like a white paper on this very issue, from maybe outdated, but from our Department of Transportation or somebody?
Well, the things I've seen are the beyond mobility. So that's looking at the mass transit side. So that just came out recently.
Mhm.
Then the EVIC study, that was all the car side.
Mhm.
And what I'm kind of interested is how, how does one compare the two?
Mhm.
So
And do they address cost effectiveness so that you'd have something to compare, or is that what really your challenge is? They don't do that, and you're taking their data, trying to put a single figure on it to say to make the comparison, which you can't do if you just have the numbers.
right. Yeah. So I don't know how much is their deficiency and how much is my deficiency. I haven't.
Anyway, it could be worth just having a conversation with some of the folks who wrote that report, or just sort of see where they're going with this, because it's really important work, for the ZEV Coalition and for us. And it takes us to the next level of really looking broadly at policy, not just kind of jumping on this bill or that bill, assuming it
Right,
sounds good,
right.
it looks good. So but it's a lot for one person to take on, and if there's other folks working on it, it'd be great to involve them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was, I think MIT had a future, they had their series of future studies.
Yeah,
and,
I remember that. And
they-
they
one
said
is
that
the
they said we
future
weren't going to have many
I think.
EVs, remember?
But
Remember that?
people
You and
have
I
done,
argued this over whether
yeah, we've
they
had a lot
said
of argument.
that until like the batteries come down to under $100 per something, it wasn't going to happen, and they weren't heading there, and so
I actually forget what conclusion they drew,
okay.
but
I don't remember
But they
them
did-
focusing a lot on mass transit, though.
probably
No, they
not.
didn't.
I
They
don't
didn't.
think I think that's right. But there was been estimates. I remember seeing studies showing, the adoption rate of EVs would increase by such and such if the incentive increased by such and such. And I take that stuff with a grain of salt at this point. I don't know that getting another.
Yeah, it might just be estimates.
The
So
911 is
there is,
still down.
the Transportation Center at University of California in Davis, which is run by Sperling. What's his first name? Paul. He's a very well-known guy in this field, and he has written quite a lot about this whole thing. This in a more holistic way. In
Okay,
fact, he has a whole book devoted to some of these issues, and I can look into their recent publications and see what they have been doing, Paul, and pass it on to you.
Okay.
But and maybe something from Texas also. But I'll be glad to work with you on this.
Yeah.
So
That'd be great.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to keep you out of the loop. It's just
Yeah.
No. I don't.
I'm very last minute.
No, quite honestly, I don't. It's not a complaint at all. But going forward,
Yeah,
So yeah, I'd appreciate
information.
as much help as I can get.
It seems to be in the transportation sector, perhaps, similar trade-offs as in the building sector, that maybe you can
Mhm.
make the most progress in the short term by going in one direction,
And long
like,
term,
and
yeah,
long term,
yeah,
you have to change course.
yeah.
In what maybe that if to achieve 2030 or come close to it, you
Mhm.
really have to, it's really private vehicles is
Well, it's also things have different lifetimes, right? So cars, I mean,
right,
5,
right.
10 years, and
yeah.
locomotives are
Right,
20, 30.
right.
So you have to take that into account.
But I don't know if
And
you saw a little news item about that somebody has driven a Tesla for a couple of million miles.
Yeah,
Million miles.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
that is
yeah,
that is
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's a lot of great information, and Rashid, that'd be, I guess Paul is, welcome your support if we
yeah,
were.
sure, absolutely,
Yeah.
anytime, yeah.
Good.
And to me, there's also, at the sort of larger level, that for me, there's this question of, do we have to put most of our focus on meeting our shorter term goals, perhaps at the expense of, sort of delaying longer term targets? I mean,
Yeah.
and that I don't know if that can be pulled into it, but I know one of my pet peeves in the building sector is I think there is that trade-off there as well.
Got it. I gotta sign
Anyway,
off.
yeah,
Sounds good. Take care, everybody.
Yeah,
all
I got
right.
one too.
Well, thank you, George. George found
Take
the
care.
gas price
Bye,
map.
Paul.
Okay.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
We didn't talk about next week. Maybe I'll think of something. If not, Paul, George, do you have anything on
I'll be
behavior?
in West Virginia.
Yeah,
We're almost to the point where we'll have a outline. I don't think we're quite ready for next week, but Roger and I are getting together again next week, and probably the week after we'll have something. So, and Roger's going out of town too. So
oh, okay,
anyway, we're not going to be ready for next week, but very shortly thereafter.
okay, maybe so.
There's a
Possibly we'll take
is next week a deep dive.
what is today's the 18th? Yes, next Monday is a deep dialogue.
Okay.
But we
We
yeah,
usually meet afterwards.
we usually meet afterwards, but potentially we could take the week off. And George, do you think 2 weeks from now I'd have to, or do you want to check with Roger? Whether you
Yeah,
feel like,
we'll get together, and I think our next meeting is, I think it's like next Wednesday or something. Oops.
or maybe if you could just contact him and see if you could do something for the agenda for the research team meeting 2 weeks from now.
Mhm.
I think we can. Our meeting actually is on Monday next week.
Okay,
And the goal is to get at least an outline so that we can start pitching it to you guys
Mhm.
and seeing where we take it from there. So I will contact Roger, and then I'll get back to you, Arnie,
great.
and say yay or nay.
Sounds good. Thank
for
you,
2
George.
weeks.
And
Okay.
thanks, Paul. That was a lot
Lot
of
of
really
stuff.
good information. Just, it's,
Well, I want to be. I
yeah,
want to feel like I know what I'm talking about when
Yeah.
I'm doing the legislative stuff, right?
wow. But I just find it really
Hard to believe we're not the leaders we should
hard
be.
to believe we're not the leaders we should be.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
I said it could be a systemic problem of just where people are living, right? Or it could be that Baker just slowed things down for a year It's just showing up that way.
I wouldn't
So,
put
you know,
much money on that one.
If we had David Ismay,
If we had David Ismay, he'd force you to buy.
he's forced you to buy it, yeah. You know, I think we should have, I think the biggest mistake we made was not putting up a big fight to try to save him. I don't know if it was possible at all, but
I don't
I
know.
think we should have tried.
I don't know. But
I think that was a
yeah, all right.
finding move.
See you guys.
See you.
Okay,
All right, thank you, Paul. That was great.
yeah. But the on these Pew polls, the number of people who believe that climate change is just liberals using an issue to try to control people was scary.
I mean, that's, you know, I don't know what the number is, but I can understand why that would be, you know,
It doesn't even
it's
make rational sense. What?
it's all this idea that you know, they want to take away. I mean, on the
Why?
one hand,
Why
right,
do we want to take away their rights?
on the one hand,
I might want to take away their guns, but beyond that,
on the one hand, you know, it's funny about conservatives because I haven't put this together. I mean, on the one hand, it's all about individual rights. On the
Yeah.
other hand, conservatives tend to like order and hierarchy.
yeah,
And
and they
the-
like to just be told what to do.
yeah, exactly. So
They don't want other people. They want, it's like my tribe, right? They want my tribe. Then I'm okay. You just told me what to do. I'll do it. We're all in this together.
yeah,
But if you're not in my tribe, then I don't want you telling me anything. And if anything, I
No.
should be telling you what to do.
right. Well, I've been reading this. I think I told you last night. I've been reading this book on the Spanish Civil War.
Oh yeah.
And it is, you know, Franco represented, you know, tradition and hierarchy and social order,
Which the church likes.
which that church ate it up, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that was,
yeah.
and you know, and the Republic was, you know, more multicultural, democratic, you know, and it was, you know, this whole Civil War was presumably about these two visions, these two approaches to,
Yeah.
you know, to your civilization, to your society. And it seems, you know, it just seems to play out over and over again.
Yeah. That's the sad part. It's like, have we ever learned anything?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. That was great.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.